Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. Hello.
Found Timothy, he's here for chess.
Nice to meet you, man.
What's your name?
I'm Naranjan.
Naranjan,
Yeah, nice to meet you, man.
Alright,
We got the boards.
on time this
Okay.
time.
Pieces as well?
Pieces also.
Pieces? Okay.
Yes, and I have spares just in case any of them are missing
Alright.
anything. So yeah.
Nice.
How was it, Michael? Me? Jeez. Well, my dad taught me when I was like young, so I've known how to play forever, but I didn't like start playing until I joined the society last year.
Oh, okay.
You know, about well, when did I join? I must have joined like closer to Christmas, I guess.
I don't really remember, to be honest.
So yeah, maybe about a year just under now. I've been playing like properly.
Yeah, do you know what like your ELO rating?
Yeah, it's around about like 700 or 800.
So you're bad.
Not amazing, but
Well, apparently like you're still classified as beginner until like 1,000 or something like that,
yeah,
and then only then you're like intermediate.
yeah, exactly. I don't know. But I usually play on the board more than on the
I can also put them
oh, keypad things. Would it help if we set all of them on the piece on the boards, or just leave them in the bags for reference?
Should be okay. Like,
Yeah.
to put them out, I suppose.
Alright, thank you.
Do you know Daniel Naroditsky, the speedrunner, the chess, like, grandmaster? No.
Never met him.
Well, not met him, but like...
No, I didn't.
Hello.
Why do you bring him up?
He passed away.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh no.
I literally watched, like, all of his YouTube videos during COVID.
Yeah.
Like, all of his speedruns. Like, he was, like, the reason that I'm somewhat decent at chess.
Whoa. no
And
way.
like, I just got the message now on the group chat that he passed away.
Oh,
That's so.
it's sad.
He's so young as well.
How young?
He's like 30, like mid
Oh,
30s.
really? What happened to him?
I don't know. Like the news came like an hour ago. I just got the message like 10 minutes ago.
That's wild.
That's so crazy. Like I watched all of his videos.
Yeah.
Like genuinely,
To a chess idol.
yeah. He's so young.
That's so sad.
No, it's,
You'll have to become a grandmaster in his honor.
yeah.
You've got a spare queen, you're strength with this.
Usually, both teams should have one spare queen
Oh.
sitting with them, just in case you promote a pawn or anything like that.
Hello.
So yeah, we usually just leave it next to the pieces.
Yeah. He's 29 years old.
29.
Oh my god.
That's crazy.
9th of November 1995.
Wow. That's young to be a grandmaster.
Yeah, no, he got it at 2013. He's really good.
Wow. Wow, that's insane. Oh.
He literally uploaded a video 2 days ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So he wasn't like sick or anything?
I don't know.
Oh. No, it wasn't like violent then.
We'll wait for a couple more people and then we'll start the lesson.
That sounds good.
we might as well start then, because other people will like turn up as the lesson progresses. Yeah. I love this. This is great. But anyway, hello everyone. It's kind of smaller numbers than I expected. I think maybe there's like a reading week going on or something. I don't know. But hopefully there's more people coming on later today. But welcome, beginning chess lessons. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Naranjan. I'm the Wellbeing Officer for Chess Society. Over here we've got Charlie, our president. Hello. We've got Charlie, our president, and Josh is our treasurer. He should be here any moment. We've got a bunch of other new committee members, brand new. Like, they got announced today. I don't know if they'll come here today, but like, they'll introduce themselves at some point during the year. But yeah, today is all about opening principles, right? So, I've said before that a chess game is split into 3 halves, or 3 sections, not 3 halves. That would be impossible. 3 sections: opening, middle game, and end game. So, opening is right at the middle. Opening is right at the start of the game. Middle game is towards the middle of the game, and end game is at the end of the game. We've already had 2 lessons on the end games, so today is all about the opening, right? We're starting with all the pieces now. So, some learning objectives. After the lesson, you should be able to develop your pieces effectively in the opening phase of the game, understand and apply principles for keeping your king safe, and recognize and avoid common beginner opening mistakes. Let's get started then, shall we? Alright. Opening, right? So as I mentioned before, the opening is like right at the start of the game, where essentially the aim of the opening is to get as many pieces out as possible and try and like get all your pieces into the action and get your king safe, right? The opening is like the first 10 moves roughly, and it can be like the most hectic phase of the game. But like a lot of people study the openings and like they have specific moves that they make. So I'll show over here. So like stuff like the English attack or the London system or the semi-Slav defense, they're what's known as theory pretty much. So it's kind of like predefined moves that have already been studied, and people play these quite regularly. And rather than focusing on like one of these, I'm just going to focus on like the principles of the opening rather than like go into detail about one specific one. Next week we'll go into more detail about 2 of them. So we'll talk about the London system and we'll talk about the Caro-Kann. But for today we're just going to focus on the principles, the general principles. So I'm splitting this session into 2 halves. So essentially I'm going to tell you what the principles are, and then in the second half you're going to apply them and you're going to play against each other pretty much. So part 1, opening principles. The first main principle of the opening is essentially to control the center, right? The center being like the middle 2 squares of the board, so the ones that I've highlighted right here. Your objective is to pretty much control the center and go from there pretty much. Like taking control of the center is probably like a massive fight, right? It's very hectic and you need to be able to control the center. How do you do that, you may ask? You can either do it with your pieces or with your pawns. So I want you guys' opinions, like what do you think we should be able to control the center with? Should we control it with our pawns or should we do it with our pieces? Pawns? Okay, because they're less valuable. Any other ideas? No? Okay, I'll give you an example. So I have this position right here. I've controlled the center with 2 knights, right? These are pieces. So I'm controlling the center with 2 knights. And from this, it's kind of a bad thing because knights and like pieces pretty much, you can like sort of boss them around with your pawns, right? So in this position, because I have 2 knights in the center, if I'm playing as black, I'm just going to kick them out of the center, right? I'm just going to push the pawns and I'll kick them out of the center, right? And again, I'll kick it out of the center. And now black, if I'm playing as black, I've got huge control over the center compared to these knights, they have no control of the center whatsoever, right? So essentially, like you said before, it's correct to control the center with pawns rather than pieces. And over here, I've said that again. Control the center with your pawns. Pawns in the center, they can't be kicked around easily like knights can. So, like, they can't move around. The pawns are very solid, right? So if you put them in the center, they probably won't move that much, to be honest. The best way to do this is to play pawn e4 or pawn d4. So the two examples I have here are pawn e4 and pawn d4. They both control the center. You place a pawn in the center and you control the center with it pretty much. And another nice thing to know about it is that it also opens up lines for your queen and your bishop as well. So if you played a move like b4, for example, it's not a great move because it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't control the center, and it doesn't really open any other lines for any of your pieces, right? So e4 or d4, probably your best options, to be honest. Does that make sense so far? Yeah? And another thing to mention is that if your opponent allows you to put 2 pawns in the center of the board, just do it, right? It's a good idea because, as I said before, you're controlling the center. So putting 2 pawns in the center is very good, right? It's the most advantageous thing you can do in the opening, right? So I've got an example over here. If I played e4 with white, and black plays sort of a passive move, right? They played b6. Doesn't really do anything, doesn't really control the center. A grandmaster might play this, right? They're crazy, right? They do whatever they want, and they'll probably get away with it. But for us as beginners, try and control the center. Try and play moves like e5 or d5 that attack the center pretty much. So something like b6 doesn't control the center, and that allows me to play d4. And now I've got 2 pawns in the center, right? So if I show you this example again, I control the center with both pawns, right? So you may as well, if you can get 2 pawns in the center without it being contested by your opponent, just do it, right? But if like for example we played e5, so if I play e5, technically I can play d4. I can put 2 pawns in the center, but it's not recommended, to be honest, because it opens up a trade between the pawns. And you don't really want to do that, to be honest. Hello. Because, like I said, if you've got at least 1 pawn in the center, that's good enough, right? Trying to get 2 pawns in the center and trading so early isn't great. Hello. But pretty much get 2 pawns in the center if possible. If not, put 1 pawn in the center. And once you've done that, now it's time to get your pieces into the game, right? So a good rule of thumb when you're playing chess, when you're doing the opening, is to put your knights out before your bishops. So what this means is once you've moved your pawns out into the center, bring your knights out first and then bring your bishops out afterwards. Because knights are a lot more flexible, right? They can hop over things, they can zigzag and move around very easily. Whereas bishops, if you place them on one square, you kind of want to force them to stay there, I suppose. Think of it like a bishop, like a sniper, for example, right? You want your sniper, if you're in an army, for example, and you're trying to position your snipers in the correct place, you want to keep them centered, pretty much. You want to keep them at one place, rather than move them around all the time, right? So, an example of this, so e4, e5, knight f3. Get your knight into the game, right? So 2 pawns in the center, and then bring your knight out. So an example for black as well, if we play knight f3, we can play knight c6, right? That's bringing your knights into the game because you've got 2 pawns in the center. You bring your other knight out, then your bishops, and then hope for the best, right? So, like I said here, a good example of an opening principle is knight f3. So, just one thing, if you don't remember anything else from today, like I always say this like during all of my sessions, if you remember one thing from my sessions, knights before bishops, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. And this is an example of like a kind of position that will be like really nice to achieve. It's not actually going to happen because obviously black hasn't moved any of the pieces. But this is like kind of like an optimal position that you want to go for. So you got 2 pawns in the center, you got your knights out into the optimal places, you got the bishops out, and you're controlling the entire center, right? So remember before, we have to control the center, and we're doing that. Like, we're doing that extremely well compared to black, who hasn't moved any of the pieces. So does that make sense, everyone? Yeah. This is what's known as like the golden opening. So it's golden because it's like it's great, right? Gold is great, I suppose. But it's not gonna happen. Try and get a position like this. Try and like use the techniques that I've told you from this, like knights out, bishops, afterwards, and try and implement those into your own games pretty much. And so once we've done all of that, we're able to switch our attention to keeping our king safe. Because now that we've got all the pieces out, what do we do with our king, right? We've got to keep it safe. And the safest place on a chessboard is the edge of the board, surrounded by all of your other pieces, right? And essentially, what castling does is makes it safer, right? It makes the king safer. It pushes it towards the side of the board, and it's like behind, it can be behind your pawns or your pieces, whatever, and it becomes safe, right? Remember, the objective of a chess game is to checkmate your opponent's king, so whoever has the weaker king is at the disadvantage, right? So make sure that you keep your king safe by castling, and hopefully you don't get checkmated, right? So just to recap what castling actually is, essentially the king and the rook, they kind of swap places. Not necessarily swap places, but like nearly swap places. Essentially the king and the rook, if they haven't moved in a game and there's 2 spaces between them, or these spaces, whatever it is, then the king moves 2 squares towards that rook, and the rook sort of like hops over on the other sides. I think I have it over here. Yeah. So the king moves 2 squares towards the rook, and the rook jumps to the square next to the king. You can like demonstrate it on your boards as well. If you want to have a go at it, then you're more than welcome to whilst I'm talking. So just another reminder that if neither piece of them has moved, so if the king hasn't moved, and if the rook hasn't moved, then you're able to castle. But if the king has moved, then you're not able to castle. Or if the rook's moved, then you're not able to castle, right? And just an example of castling, right? So e4, e5, knight f3, like we said before, bringing the knights out, knight c6, defending the pawn, bishop c4, getting your bishop out, nice and easy, right? Knight f6, and the moment we've been waiting for, castling, right? So if you noticed before that the king moves 2 squares to the right, the rook was here before, but it hops over, and that's called castling, right? This king is now completely safe. I say completely, but anything can happen in a chess game. It's relatively safe, right? It's behind all of its pawns, it's behind the knight, it's very well guarded, right? And so, whereas compared to this king isn't as safe. It's still in the center. It hasn't been castled yet. So in this position, white has some advantage if they're able to pursue it properly, right? If they somehow go for an attack on the king immediately whilst it's still in the center of the board, they're doing well, right? So just an explanation of what I said before. They bring the knight out and the bishop, but black brings their knights out, and there's space. So there's space here to castle. There's nothing attacking it, and so we can castle. Does that make sense? Yeah? I mean, I taught the castling stuff in like my very first session, so there should be like a recording of it somewhere, hopefully. And also we have like sheets of paper. I don't know if we have them today, but like there should be sheets of paper that have all the different moves, pretty much. Like examples of castling as well. And so, I said before that like, if you leave your king in the center, it's very vulnerable to attacks. So if I go back to this position again, this king is kind of in the center compared to this one, which isn't. It's in the corner, and it's protected by the pawns. So if white were to go for an attack on this king, then they may be successful. You never know, because this king is still in the center of the board. And the reason why it's bad for the king to be in the center of the board is because, remember, the objective of a chess game is to checkmate your opponent's king. So if you don't castle, your king's going to be very weak, right? And it's susceptible to attacks. So if you leave a king in the center of the board, it's vulnerable to enemy attacks. And I've got another example. I love these examples, right? Chess is all about putting it on the board and seeing if something works or not, pretty much. So, for example, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, as we've seen before, bringing the knights out, very common. Bishop c4, bishop c5. And now, instead of castling, white plays the very strange, very dubious move. They play c3. Instead of castling, which they should have done, they try and go for the center for some reason, right? This is bad. Essentially, obviously, what I said before is you want to castle your king as early as possible. So playing a move like c3 isn't great, because if black just sticks to principles, they bring their knights out, they've got their bishop out, and white tries to go for an attack without castling their king's still in the center of the board, and when it's all said and done, it's a check, and now they've lost a pawn, so they're pawn down now. They can't move this knight, they can't take this knight, because this is known as a pin, because this bishop, so if this knight moves, this bishop would attack the king, and it's not possible to do that, pretty much. That's what's known as a pin. We'll get on to what pins are like in a couple of weeks' time, but pretty much for today, a pawn's been lost, right? A pawn's been lost. And even if white tries to castle now, they take the knight, back with the pawn, and that's the second pawn that white's already lost because they hadn't castled so quickly, right? And essentially, because they didn't castle, they lost 2 pawns, and it's not great because this bishop's also attacking the rook, and they've got to move the rook out of the way, and it's not pleasant for white, right? Just because they didn't castle on that one move, just because they played c3 and they didn't castle your king. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have the opportunity to castle your king, do it as soon as possible in the opening, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? And I've got a couple of beginner mistakes that some of you might make. Actually, no, all of you. Like, this is not an insult, because everyone makes mistakes, right? Like, I make mistakes, you make mistakes, everyone makes mistakes. Even Magnus Carlsen makes mistakes, right? But it's all about how you learn from those mistakes that's important in a chess game, right? So let's say you make a mistake, you make a blunder, go through it afterwards and try and figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen again, right? It's up to you to ensure that you recognize those mistakes, you learn from them, and ensure they don't happen again. And I've just got like 3 examples of common mistakes that people might make in the opening, and hopefully that makes sure that like you don't make those mistakes. The first one being moving the same piece multiple times in the opening. So what I said before is that remember that you need to move your knights out first and then your bishops afterwards, right? And the whole point of that is to get all your pieces into the game as soon as possible. Remember, the opening is all about developing your pieces as quick as possible so that you can go for an attack quicker than your opponent can, right? And so moving the same piece over and over again in the opening doesn't really do that, to be honest. Like, if you move the same piece over and over again, that just gives your opponent the opportunity to get all of their pieces into the game quicker than you, right? And then they've got the advantage, and they're the ones going for the attack, and probably the ones that are going to succeed, right? So I've said here, 90% of the time, it's better to bring your other pieces into the game rather than moving the same piece over and over again, right? And a nice way to ensure that this doesn't happen, because as beginner chess players, you're often going to have blind spots to this, right? You're going to be like hyper-focused about one thing that you're gonna forget that maybe you move your knight like 2 or 3 times. So every time you like try and make a move, just think back to just ask yourself, how many times has this piece moved before, right? If I've moved this knight like twice in the opening, try and consider whether it's worth moving it a 3rd time, right? And consider if there's probably a better option. There might be like a bishop on the square, on its home square that hasn't moved yet. So try and get that bishop into the game, right? It's always better to get all your pieces out than go for an attack with just one piece, right? Does that make sense? Yeah? Another another beginner mistake that beginners make is moving their queen out very early. So it's very tempting to do this because the queen's the most powerful piece, right? But at the same time, if you lose your queen so early in the game, then you're screwed, right? And bringing it out so early means that you're susceptible to losing it very early in the game as well. So just like I mentioned before about those 2 knights that were in the center over here, just like that, the queen is also like susceptible to being like bullied around the board pretty much. So it can be chased around with enemy knights or enemy bishops, and that basically helps your opponent develop pretty much. So moves like, obviously this is being attacked, so moves like knight c6, that helps your opponent because that gets their knight into the game, right? And then from there, they'll bring the knight out, which attacks the queen. The queen has to retreat. So again, like I said before, moving the same piece twice. You moved it once, and then once it's attacked, you move it again, right? And now there'll be like 2 pieces out for black and none for you, right? So please don't move your queen out early, unless you're playing like a really low-rated player and you know like how to checkmate like immediately with a queen. There's ways to do that, but against like someone else that you don't really know, please just don't do it. It's not worth the time. It's not worth the effort. Learn like good habits. So like I said before, develop your knights first, then your bishops, and then castle, and then go for your attack. The queen like supports the army, right? It doesn't lead the way. It's supposed to be like the heart of the army. Like you use it to push everything else forward, if that makes sense. And another mistake that beginners make is what I like to call pawn blindness. So I told you before that ideally you want to get 2 pawns in the center of the board, right? It'll be nice to get 2 pawns in the center of the board, but there might be positions where you put 2 pawns in the center of the board and then you forget about them, right? Don't forget about them because pawns are like extremely important in a chess game. All the pieces are important, right? But especially pawns that are in the center, they're very important because, like I said before, you need to control the center with your pawns. And so I want you guys to like look at this position and figure out why I've included it in here. What's so bad about it? Any thoughts? They can, yes. So all the pawns, just for the people on the recording, all the pawns can be eaten by the knights, so it's not very good. Any other ideas why this is a bad position? So essentially, you are correct, pretty much. So these pawns, they can be eaten by each other as well. So not just by the knights, but they can be eaten by each other. So what I was trying to get at was that this pawn right here is completely free to take, right? If I'm playing as white, I can take this e5 pawn completely free. So d takes e5. The knight can't take back because it's protected by this knight, right? So that's just a completely free pawn that blacks completely forgot about, and they've just left there in the center of the boards, and they didn't really care about it. So that's the thing, pretty much. Like, if you've got pawns in the center of the boards, try and take care of them. Try and make sure that they can't be eaten, as you said in your own words. Like, take care of them, because at the end of the day, if you get them to the end of the boards, they can promote and become a queen, or any of your pieces, any other pieces. So they're valuable too, you know? And so we move on to the second section of today, applying the opening principles to your games. I'm going to do something with you guys called good move versus bad move. And I want you guys to tell me, like, I've got a couple of examples on the board. I want you guys to tell me if you think it's a good move or if it's a bad move. So, pawn h4. Good move or bad move? Bad move. Why do you guys think that? It's not centered? Okay. Central, yeah. So that's correct. It's a very bad move. Unless you're Magnus Carlsen, please don't play this. He's the greatest player of all time. He can do with it. But we're all beginners here. Let's stick to the basics. Let's stick to the principles. Right. So remember what I said before, that you got to control these four squares. You got to control the center. And pawn h4 does absolutely nothing, right? It's not controlling the center at all. And it's just a really bad move. So, like I said, unless you're Magnus Carlsen, just don't play this on your first move. Pawn e4. Good move or bad move? Good move. How come? It is central, yes. So, like I said before, trying to control these four squares in the center and putting a pawn in the center, perfect, right? Pawn e4, probably like the most played move in all of chess history, pawn e4, right? Getting your pawn into the center, controlling the center. Good move, yeah? Knight to f3. Good move or bad move? Good? Yeah, how come? Yes. That's good. So, like I said before, yeah, knights out before bishops. So e4, e5, knight f3, right? You've got your knight out, and you're trying to go for the center, pretty much. You're trying to control as much of the center as possible. And knight f3 does that because, remember, it moves in an L shape, so it controls this square and it controls this square as well. So it's a good move, yeah? Is it making some sense so far? Yeah? How about queen h5? Good move or bad move? Bad? How come? Sorry? Too early, yes. So, as you said, it's very early to move your queen out. So early, because, like I said before, it can get like pinated by all the other pieces, and that just helps black, right? So, queen h5, bad move. Don't bring your queen out too early. Bishop d6. It's a bit of a tough one, I'd say. But that's correct, yes. So, good move or bad move? Bad move. That's correct. So, it is a bad move, that's correct, because if I'm playing as black here, I'd want to get knight c6, because, like I said before, you want to get your knights out before your bishops. And another bad thing about this move as well is that you want to think about like what you're going to do later on in the game as well. So remember I told you knights before bishops, but look at this bishop right here. Okay, this bishop can only move if this pawn moves out of the way, right? But it can't move. Exactly, because the bishop's blocking the way. So that's a terrible move. So bishop d6 is a terrible move because not only does it not really control the center, it kind of does because it's controlling one of the four squares, but it's also blocking in your own pieces. It's blocking in your own development. So bishop d6, not a good move. That was good. You got it like immediately, so well done. That's really good. How about knight takes pawn e5? So this knight would take this pawn. Is that a good move or is that a bad move? Good?
The bishop's the only diagonal, right?
It is diagonal, yes.
Yeah, he's able to eat the knight. So
N-
he can't go far.
no, that's correct. So good move or bad move? Good? Yeah. So it is a good move, actually, yeah. Because what I've told you guys before about pawn blindness, remember that this knight, not only does it control for the center as well, but it's literally attacking this pawn as well. So, yeah.
What about not moving the same pawns in the opening multiple times?
So was that about like moving the same piece, but rather moving the same pawns?
Yeah, moving the same piece.
Okay. So, as in like, do you mean if I move the same piece, like if I move the same pawn multiple times, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that what you're saying?
You said earlier that you should just move like these like blanks
Yeah.
in the opening, but here you're moving the knight again. So
Ah, okay.
make it a bad move or this thing.
So that's a good spot actually. Yeah. So, in a sense, it's a good and a bad move in a way, because like in chess you can play like a million moves, and there's good reasons for it making that move and there's bad reasons for it. So, technically, you would be correct for saying that it's a bad move because I don't want to move this knight out multiple times. But in the sense of this is just a free pawn, so I guess it's okay to move it again. Unless you can like find a way that makes you realize that black has a way of like pinating the knight again. So if they have a way of like pushing it out for their own development, then I guess you could say it's a bad move for that reason. But simplistically, let's look at it simplistically. It's taking a free pawn, right? If you're up a pawn, then you're doing well, I suppose. But yeah, that's a nice find. I didn't even think of that as well. So, good move and bad move in a way. Any other questions? No? How about knight f6? This one's a bit more difficult. Good move or bad move?
Oh, because it could eat e4,
Okay.
as well as it's out before the bishop. So it's not horrible.
Yeah. That's what my thinking was as well. So, remember that we need to move our knights first before our bishops. So, black is doing exactly that, right? They've got their pawn in the center. They've got this knight out, and now they're getting the second knight out. It's probably a good move, right? Because
But
they're...
to her point, she's saying that if he moves things multiple times in the beginning, it might be a little contradicting or whatever you said in the beginning.
So this knight hasn't moved at all. So it was here at first, and then it moved here. That was its first move.
Same with G1 to F3. I
G1.
think it's the same situation that you're talking about, no?
No, because they've only moved once. Like each piece has only moved once in this scenario. Whereas before the knight was going to move twice.
So let's look back here. So what I was saying was that it's moved here once, and it's moved here again a second time. So she was saying that it's a bad move because it's moving again. Like, you want to move all your other pieces out before.
Okay.
Whereas in this position, all of them have only moved once. So it's not relevant to this position right now. Yeah? So, did we get an answer to before? Was it a good move or is it a bad move? Good move? So that is correct. It is a good move because black's following principles. They've got their knights out before their bishops. They're doing okay, right? And I think it's the final one. So pawn a3. This one's a bit more difficult as well. Good move or bad move? What do you guys think?
Should he be moving the knight out before the side pawns or no?
That's good. Any other suggestions?
Maybe move the bishop and like castle instead.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying like maybe move it here and castle.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a good idea as well. So it is a bad move because pawn a3, like in this position, it doesn't really do anything, to be honest. Like all of these other moves that white and black have made, they all have a purpose, right? They all try and control the center. They all try and control the center, but pawn a3 is like stepping off the accelerator, right? You need to keep the pressure on, but that moving pawn a3 doesn't do anything, right? Ideally, like you said, you could move the bishop out and go for castle, or you can bring the knight out as well, so knights before bishops. And pawn a3 doesn't do anything, so it is a bad move, yes. And now it's your turn. Alright, so what I want you guys to do is to pair up with the people next to you and try and play the opening with each other, right? Try and implement the concepts that we learned together and like try and articulate what your thought processes are after you do each move. So if you play a move, just tell your opponent, oh, I played this move because so and so, right? Yeah, I'll leave it to you guys then. You guys all have boards in front of you anyway? I just want to say that we do have 5 minutes left in the session, but we have this room for like a long time anyway, so if you want to stay for a lot longer, then you're more than welcome to. But if you want to leave at 8 o'clock, that's completely fine. Like, there's no obligations to stay for longer.
So that's a special move that you've got in chess. Now it only works when there's these pieces can still be on the board, but they just can't be between your king and your castle, basically. And you can castle in two directions. So rook can also be put a castle. Yeah. What's your name, sorry? This one's the king. You can tell it's sometimes confusing with like if which one's the king and which one's the queen. The king will always be slightly taller, and he'll always 90% of the time he'll wear a crown. And when they spawn in, the king will be on the opposite color. The queen is the most powerful piece, sits on her color, which is the yeah. So no, you're good. So castle, your king will take 2 steps towards the castle he wants to castle first, and the castle will pop over the way. That's the only time your king can ever take 2 steps at once, and it's also the only move that will move 2 pieces in one go. So that's really nice because it gets your king sort of in the corner. Usually these ones will be like off doing something, so you've got to stay focusing over here. So you wouldn't want people coming in, mucking around with your king, so it's nice to keep him hidden in the
Like, I
corner.
record it and everything. I keep saying that I'm going to put it on YouTube, but I haven't done it yet.
Oh, is that like a YouTube channel?
Yeah, yeah, we've got a YouTube channel, but I haven't
It's
put it
always
on
those 2
YouTube.
steps.
Like,
So do you want to see
I'm
if you can
recording
figure out where they go?
everything. I should do. So
Yeah,
all the
like I
cartoons
think you
will
would
go
go
on there as
if you
well. if you're able to put two pawns in the center, you can do that. But in this position, so like here before, you can't put it here because it's, remember that you're trying to control the center, and white's doing a really good job of controlling this square. Right? They've got the knight controlling it. They've also got the pawn controlling it. But you have no control of it whatsoever at all because none of your pieces see this square. So putting this pawn is essentially saying goodbye to it. Just take it, pretty much. Yeah. So what would be a better move instead of this? What do you think? So you're trying to go for this. I like that you're doing that. Yeah, that's very aggressive. So how do you prepare getting that there? How do you control this?
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
No, it's not possible.
I just
Well, it's
keep
possible.
going.
The only thing is, you could take him, and then from that position, you're just able to get like, she'll get the knight, and you'll just get a pawn, but you wouldn't be able to take their knight in revenge. So it's usually better to leave them.
Where would you play that move? That's good. Chess is hard, don't worry.
Well, again, she can take just a pawn, so then she'll be okay.
I prefer games like this where you like have unlimited time to make moves. It's like pawns are numbered and you've only got 10 minutes or so.
No,
So like towards the end of the game,
this
it's
is
stressful, like
interesting.
3 seconds left, so I make 8
Because
moves.
obviously,
I didn't
that
think
one then
you
does
could.
block the knight.
No, definitely. Because playing with the clock
Usually
is like huge pressure
you
as well.
would leave that guy where he starts for a while. He's gonna make
But I feel like games like underdog are tough stuff. It's like if you're making it someone way better, you can just run on the clock.
not really, but you can like move the bishop out of the way, so you can pass the win the next turn.
That's good. Why did you play that move?
So that,
It's okay.
I just wonder about the whichever control the center, like you said, if I do not, then fires on him, and this was fires on him.
Yeah. That's good. You're getting there. Well done.
Okay. So not the best move. Does she just like move in like a four, where she's got both pieces being looked at? I think the best thing to do at that point is to
You guys okay?
Yeah.
yeah, so she can try and eat both of them. So
So then she'll get
yeah, she'll get you either way. So you have to try and decide which one you want to save.
Which one is more beneficial?
It's a classic question. Yeah. The bishops are better sort of towards the end, and the knights are better
Sorry,
at the
these
middle,
are-
just because of how it's supposed to move around.
It's fine.
I myself
Sorry.
always prioritize my bishops over my knights, but
It's not tiny,
you know, that's a
like
big
most games
first
are
one.
like 10 minutes or so.
Oh yeah. How would it be that with the knight?
So you can't take over the knight, but you can like save the bishop.
How do you know this?
Well, more just by like
You guys are
moving
very
away.
far out of the opening as well. So like, if you want to like,
Stop.
I guess start. Yeah. I don't know how to say it like, but like, try and focus on the opening, like the first 8 to 10 moves, and sort of like figure out why you're playing each move. So like
Yeah.
introspection. Try and figure out why you're playing each move. Yeah.
Be fun, right?
It's good that you're playing all the game as well. Like, there's no harm in that at all.
Okay, so that's nice.
Oh.
She decided to spare. So yeah.
At the start of the game, there are rooms into that.
I think so, yeah.
So if we go into that,
Much
Yeah.
better.
the exact same pieces that might have for the exact same deal.
That's all.
I don't know how many cards. We just have to fill that list.
I mean, still, sorry. It's okay. Remember that the queen always goes on its own square. So it's a black queen, so it'll go with the black
Yeah,
square.
but you should just put like online the queen, so that like a star,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm just supposed to see.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Use tends to work when you've got the gun. But I say it's worse on the side because you've got that option.
Okay.
That's nice.
This is very nice actually.
It all depends on the position.
How much chess have you played?
Yeah, but if
You
but
should set up a strategy.
your king puts here in the centre, puts a pawn
Yeah.
in almost every
Fair
position.
enough.
So try to pass as low as possible. That's why.
And then I stopped 3 years ago. Started doing something.
Fair enough.
Are you guys still in?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. So, what have you done?
You've copied every single one we've so far.
Okay.
We got knights out.
Yep.
Bishop went up because last time there was no way. I mean, this is a progressive move. You thought they were going to? You thought they were going to the pawn? Okay, I thought you were going to the pawn.
Nice. Thank you for answering all my questions, by the way. You were on it as well. It's so great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can use this guy. She can, but you've got to look at who's protecting him.
The bishop.
Not bishop.
That's the.
Oh, yeah, bishop. But he is. How's that? He is fine.
Good point. Great.
Just like
So you can still
I was doing
sort of
as a kid.
convince her to move away.
Literally
Can't
since
really
getting
hear.
to since starting
So
uni.
do you know where they
Once.
look when they're attacking?
Oh, okay.
Who's there?
These guys?
I've done a lot of maths.
Yeah.
School, practically. And then stopped. But I didn't.
Not today. So when a
And then
pawn
go back.
attacks, they will only look at the two spaces
All of my roommates are
diagonally in front of you.
so I learned.
So this one,
Easy.
yeah, he sees that spot and he sees that spot. So if you were to move him here, he wouldn't see the knight, he'd only see these two spots, which means he wouldn't be able to threaten the knight, and the knight would keep going about his business.
He would not be able to.
Absolutely not. But if you were to move bishop from for example, this one, he would be able to see the knight because he can see that. Yeah.
You're saying between these two, but you're saying this is worse than this.
Yeah.
And the knight can move permanently.
Yeah. So they're usually trapped for a while at the
Like
start.
what kind of difficulties?
That's another benefit of castling, is it helps you get the rooks ready to come and play as a whole.
That's not.
Well, like I said, in the opening, it's more about just getting a piece to move that.
Sorry?
So like,
First castle.
I would work so much
Sorry, what
about
did you
Did
say?
my first castle.
You did first castle. Nice. Well done.
So what, for
Was it
example,
enough right now? Or
um,
it wasn't.
right now you're
Like
not
this
sending
was the-
because I can just eat
It
two.
was good.
And normally you don't want to lose a pawn, so you want to try and lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Queen.
So like the rank
Queen
is
to the one to the or one three.
Any direction, any space. The most powerful piece. If this was the opening, I'd say it was fine, but you're out of the opening. So remember I said that don't move your queen out so early. It's not early anymore. Like, many pieces have gone out, so I say it's
Okay,
fine.
underneath. Okay, king obviously at the top.
How
I
you
don't know
stop
actually, I
that?
think king's like the bottom.
First of all, is there an
It's
attack?
like
Yes.
Yeah?
It's on this for
That's
sure.
what you're
Okay.
trying to
It's on this.
Yep.
You want to face the
So
So how you stop it?
Oh, you want
What's
to
your plan?
stop? Because I'm just thinking, because I don't know.
Wait, this is a choice?
It can go
So
and then wrote that so then they can
You're,
move forward.
she's trying to use the queen to checkmate you, right? So try and figure out where the queen should like go through each move that it can make.
Here. That's the easy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna think about it. I can figure it out. I'm gonna think about trying to piece the whole point of
And
like
on the Armenia move, where would she end up?
you know what I mean?
Here and here.
Mm-hmm. And where's the worst out of those two?
Yes.
F7.
Well, F7, you
I
can
don't know, think about
go
it.
ahead and take revenge with the rook,
I
which is
know,
quite
but
nice. But if she was to go here, what would you be able to do if she got there?
Oh, take care. No.
Yeah, but I've taken, if
That's the
you're
king, yeah.
taking four, I've taken knight to it.
If she got here, what would I be able to do?
Mm-hmm.
I can't go backwards with this, can I?
No, you can only march forwards.
Let's put it on the board actually.
Option one could be finding a way
This is what's
get
gonna happen.
another.
Yeah.
What can you do?
I can't do this.
Or option
No,
two could be
because of the knight
try and get
protecting that square, you're not able to put the king on that space, unfortunately.
and it'll be more focused
I
on
can
that.
take her.
No, that would be too many moves.
Oh, instead, yeah.
Well, you can't knock it off.
So because you can't take this
Attack the piece.
because the knight will take it, that's illegal, right? So
And then bear in mind I can also
this
attack
is
the knight as well.
checkmate, right? You can't
It's
do
like a
that
lot of like,
because the queen will take.
it's like a lot of trading.
And
But then again, your
pawn
pawn is protecting the knight.
So
So if you did this,
Before she gets there, then
then I die.
so we will thank you with this here. So
How
how
can
can we
we
stop this queen from getting here? Let's bomb it. So let's play it out first of all. So is that you with
Yeah.
the rook? What would you do?
But yeah, right now that piece is protecting itself.
No,
No, because the knight's still protected.
Hey, history.
But there is one move you can make to get away from
Then knight to
It's okay. I mean, you can keep going if you want to. Like if it's something that you're enjoying as well. If it's something you like making up, then you're more than welcome to carry on. Like, I got no complaints. Don't worry.
we can take the footing. That's checkmate, just because the king's trapped. You can't run away from the queen, but you also can't take the queen. So, and there's no one else here who can help.
Oh, what is
you
that
out.
move going? Oh,
You
so
got back to the
it's
same position that happened last time.
No, just like
Oh,
flying
okay.
movements, yeah.
Okay.
So since there's no way to take her, and there's no way to get out of danger, so your king would just go ahead and perish.
Yeah.
And be checkmate. Yeah. If that was the case, then yeah, you could move him there. Let's see what happens. So we can imagine it's there. And then what would you do in that situation?
attacking the knight. Yeah, just what do you mean?
So there's a pawn here,
Yeah.
and you took the pawn.
What's any
Wait,
options?
so the kills it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you get it.
You can go diagonal. It's same moves as a queen, but only one step. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna end the session here because I'm a bit hungry. I need to get some food. I'm sorry about that, but you're welcome to stay as well. Like, we have the room for as long as possible. I'm hoping people don't kick us out. But yeah, anyway, thank you all for coming. Next lesson is next week as well. Exactly the same time, exactly the same place. We're gonna carry on what we talked about this week, but instead we're gonna talk about like specific openings. So if you remember back to like that slide I had before, if I can get it up. So if we look at this, we're going to talk about like one of the specific openings. So we're going to think about the London system. I'm going to talk about the Caracan as well. So that's all for next week. But for today, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate that you all came along. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks. Have a nice day.
Likewise.
See you next time.
Thank you.